I want to talk about diet because a lot of people have asked, what diet do I recommend? And I've touched on this topic a few times, but in this video, I'm going to go more in depth. I don't really have that much time, so probably in the future, I'm going to have to make a video that is more detailed. But in this video, I still want to talk about the main ideas of what I believe in when it comes to diet. So here's the consensus on diet, basically. Consensus from the experts, from the people that have been researching the field of nutrition for decades. And basically, the idea is a diet that you can adhere to, so that you think is sustainable for yourself, that you can keep doing for the rest of your life, and also that coincides with these four pillars. So one of them is mainly whole foods, so foods that are minimally processed, for example, whole grains instead of refined grains, and fruits instead of refined sugars, etc. Second one, plant forward. All the populations that live a long time, they're all plant-based. You cannot really find a population with an average life expectancy that is high, that is also centered around animal foods. You just cannot find it. Even if you remove the confounding variable of infant mortality, you still don't see high lifespans in populations that don't have a plant-based diet. So that's the second. Third one is lean protein and healthy fats. So basically you want to reduce the amount of saturated fat. You want a diet that is basically one that avoids processed meats and red meats, etc., because they contain a lot of saturated fat and cholesterol, which raise heart disease rates. We know this because of multiple different reasons, but my favorite argument is that people that genetically have high LDL, which is a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia, these people have 10 to 50 times higher rates of heart disease. So avoiding saturated fat and cholesterol is one of the pillars of a healthy diet. And number 4, low in sugar and sodium. The easiest way to avoid these is just by avoiding processed foods. So processed foods are the ones that are full of sodium and full of refined sugar. So low in processed foods, low in saturated fat and cholesterol, plant-centered, and centered around whole foods. That's the main idea. And in this video, I want to talk about this study, which is a prospective cohort study. And before you write in the comments, oh, bro, that's association, in case you're just confused, let me just explain it a little bit. So yes, at the top of the pyramid, you have systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, and second, you have the randomized controlled trials themselves. But cohorts are also pretty high. They're not as high, but they're still pretty high. And why is that? It's because, yes, while it's harder to control for confounding variables like randomized controlled trials can control for, with cohort studies, you have a way larger sample size. That's why they're good studies, even though it's way harder to control for confounding variables than with randomized controlled trials. So with a randomized controlled trial, you may have a few dozen people in the study, or maybe a few hundred if you're lucky. But with cohort studies, you can have thousands or even millions of people. So it can account for confounding variables by drastically increasing the sample size. So for example, in this study that I want to talk about, just look at the amount of participants. So a total of 96,000 Seventh-day Adventist men and women were recruited. And basically they ended up with a sample size of 73,000 participants. You will never get that with a randomized controlled trial. So this is why I don't discard associative data. It's because with prospective cohorts, you have really large sample sizes, but they're not as good as randomized controlled trials when it comes to accounting for confounding variables. But with randomized controlled trials, you have the methodology being better, and they're better at accounting for outliers, and they're better at accounting for confounding variables in general, but they don't have the large sample size that prospective cohorts have. So that's why I like both. Anyways, let's talk about this study, which was a Seventh-day Adventist study with a pretty large sample size, 73,000 people. One of the things the study found was that, on average, vegetarian diets had a much lower all-cause mortality rate. All-cause mortality is basically the best metric. It's hard outcomes. It's you have two groups. Which group dies more, basically? And all-cause mortality is basically all the causes of death combined. It's heart disease, it's cancer, it's all of these combined. In vegetarian diets, they had lower all-cause mortality. And this was a pretty large sample size, like I mentioned. They tried to account for a ton of confounding variables. They tracked a bunch of data. But here's what I want to show you. I want to show you the results. So here we have the hazard ratios. So one is just baseline. It's just the normal diet, non-vegetarian diet. So the lower the better. The lower the number, the lower the all-cause mortality number. So when you see, for example, 85, it basically means 15% lower all-cause mortality, which is a pretty insane number, by the way, because all-cause mortality is all the diseases combined. So even 10% lower all-cause mortality is a pretty insane number. So the worst one was the baseline, the non-vegetarian group, and the best one wasn't normal vegetarian, it wasn't vegan, it was actually pesco-vegetarian. So they either ate fish or legumes when it comes to their protein intake. And this is also the Mediterranean diet. If you check at the guidelines of what the Mediterranean diet says, it basically says try to have as protein source fatty fish or legumes. And that's basically the group that lived the longest. So this is the diet that I promote. It's also one that is pretty in line with the guidelines from Harvard. And, Harvard has an average IQ of over 130, so they're all pretty smart people, especially the researchers. I don't like the fact that they promote oils here. I would prefer whole foods like avocados, nuts, and seeds, but it's still the best guideline, I would say, out of all of them, because I've checked all of them. So yeah, the group that lived the longest wasn't the vegan group, even though that one came close. It was actually I guess you can call it pescatarian group, the one that focused on either fish or legumes when it comes to their protein intake, instead of focusing on red meat or white meat like most people do. So yeah, those are the results of the study. And yeah, that's pretty much it.